Hello again, 110. I decided to make another brief video that will answer the syllabus question of describing presidential government. And on page 189 in the new textbook, there's this interesting graphic here that's behind me that really shows how the presidency has changed in the last 80 years since the New Deal, since the Great Depression, because it really helped to change that office. This was a chart, a worksheet that I had students in the spring work on, and in this box should be the White House staff. In this box should be independent agencies and government corporations. Down here is the executive office of the presidency. And in this particular oval is the traditional advisory group of the president going back to the beginning of the country. These are all the different cabinet positions. And they have changed as the country has changed as well. Originally there was War, Treasury, State, and the Attorney General. And you can see all of the other ones that have evolved over the course of history. Interior was added after the Mexican-American War. Commerce was one of the early additions, as was agriculture. Energy and education came about in the Carter administration in the late 1970s. The point of this is that these are independent institutions themselves. And as we'll see in chapter 7, when we talk about the bureaucracy, sometimes institutions come to have a life of their own. And the president here in the middle of all of these different institutions that are trying to get his ear, all of these different agencies and offices are going to attempt to influence him. And because of this has resulted in this particular branch overseeing or superseding what was originally. As we've discussed before, until the 1930s, we had congressional dominated government. Since the 1930s, because of the Depression, originally, presidential government has come to dominate the United States government. And specifically, the executive office down here and the National Security Council since the 1950s and the Cold War became very, very influential, more so than some of these other institutions over decisions that the president makes. Examples of independent agencies would be the Central Intelligence Agency or the Environmental Protection Agency that was developed in the 1970s by President Nixon. Another government corporation that's not on here would be the Post Office. The staff, the Chief of Staff, is a very important part of the Presidential Advisory Group. His press secretary meets with the media on a weekly and sometimes even more frequently basis. And special assistants and other advisors can be very important advisors to the president. Lastly, the Council of Economic Advisors is also a key part of the executive office, and the Office of Management and Budget develops the president's budget as chief legislator. The president must submit as the chief administrator who's in charge of running the government. He's got to submit a budget every year. And this particular part of the executive office does that job for him. So hopefully this explains that question now of how we have developed presidential government as opposed to legislative government. All of these institutions have developed on top of what originally was only the cabinet. Now you have all of these other institutions that are trying to get the president's ear as well.